from VC and from venture capital and equity to crowdfunding. So we're going to talk about everything and all ways of financing it. I'll get to the panel in just a second. I'm actually more interested right now in the composition of the room. How many here are movie-centric? Okay. How many are TV-centric? And how many are digital only, online and otherwise? Print, any of those dinosaurs admit to be around? Okay. Just kidding. I still think print is rather important. So do a couple of these guys here, as you'll find out in a second. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and they each get a 30-second pitch. Two of them have books that they're probably going to want to talk about in their introduction, but we'll start out with, oh, by the way, I'm Larry Gerbrandt. My company is Media Valuation Partners. We do consulting, business plans, litigation support. We encourage people to sue each other and then hire us as experts and do valuations. So that suing each other is not a problem in Hollywood. So it keeps the lawyers kids in orthodontia. Anyway, Jason, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll work our way back to me.
Perfect. I am the one who did not write a book, so I'll let Sky and Seth speak to that. But I'm a managing director at Shamrock Capital. For those of you that don't know Shamrock is a private equity firm based in Los Angeles that is solely focused on the media, entertainment, and communications sector. It started many decades ago by Roy Disney, who founded the company as the Disney, basically, Family Investment Office, and has since then become a fully backed institutional capital private equity fund that, once again, has always been core to investing in media, entertainment, and communications. We have two different strategies. One is buying middle market companies in those sectors, whether it's through complete buyouts, control positions, or a recap. And then we have a separate strategy which is dedicated to investing in content, both in film, or I should say in film, TV, and music. The key ingredient is that the content has had to have been released, whether it was for 2 weeks, 3 years, or 30 years, we're indifferent because we have the ability to forecast the long-term cash flow potential of those particular assets. The firm currently has $1.8 billion under management, and I'm pleased to be there, but before Shamrock, I was with JP Morgan covering the entertainment sector for a little under 11 years.
Sky?
I'm going to stand up because I can't see everybody in the back. I'm Sky Moore. Glad to be here. Good morning or good afternoon. I am the author of one of the books. My book is called The Biz, and if you don't have it, you should have it because it's an overview of the film industry and the business side of the industry. And I have a free channel on YouTube that teaches the film business. So if you search my name on YouTube, you'll find the channel. That's basically a course that I taught at UCLA for years and years and years, but it's now on YouTube. I have a Forbes blog as well, so you can search my name you can find my blog on Forbes where I talk about entertainment-related subjects. And then, of course, I'm on all the Twitter and all the other craziness, LinkedIn and on and on and on. And if anybody, I passed out in the front at least a how to contact me and my various fun stuff I do, newsletter, Forbes, et cetera. So if you want that, this is like my business card after the seminar. You can come and pick it up. I'll just leave it up there. That's me.
And actually, in his spare time, he actually does entertainment deal work, I think.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that, right. And I represent a lot of most importantly, I represent a lot of Chinese companies coming into Hollywood in a big way.
Okay. Seth?
Hi, I'm Seth Shapiro. I've worked in the intersection of digital and media for, I guess, 20 years. I have a book, which is coming out in a month. You can all see the cover. It's up on Amazon now, but It's actually the first of three, and what I'm also a professor at USC, and what occurred to me is that most of the models and the booms and busts that we see have all happened before. And so what I got really interested in was, how did radio happen? How did TV happen? And so this book is an exploration going back to 1900 through all of the real innovations that happened that drove TV from this ridiculous idea around the turn of the previous century into the most powerful medium in the world. So I go through all of them, Lucy and Sarnoff and Paley, and how advertising changed the nature of the business, and a bunch of stuff. I guess most recently, I've been consulting on a lot of over-the-top and SVOD services, just because there's been a lot of business there, on the service development side, on the buy side, and the sell side. And most recently, the really interesting area has been immersive tech, VR, AR, and all of the things that are growing up around that. So maybe we'll spend a little time talking about that too.
We will. Speaking of going back to the 1800s, when I was briefing the panel in terms of what we were going to talk about, at least get the discussion going. And by the way, we're going to go to the audience pretty quick for questions. So these guys have answers. We hope you have questions, and we'll make the two meet. I was thinking about a line out of Charles Dickens about 150 years ago, and how apropos it was for at least how to sum up the industry today. And I'm sure it's the opening lines of The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. So it just, it is, at least in terms of my 40 years in the business, I hate to admit it's even actually a little longer. The white hair, I've earned every one of them. But I've never seen so much opportunity, at least so many, we've never had this many TV series, maybe fewer movies, but the TV business, I mean, when you add in all the cable networks, the broadcast networks, the pay TV, SVOD, Hulu, Netflix, all the other on-demand services, there's never been more demand for original content. So my opening question for the panel is, why isn't everybody happier, richer, and what happened to the back end? Because that's the one that seems to be the component that is missing. Each of these companies buys up all the rights. So has this turned into a work-for-hire town? And we'll go with Sky first.
Well, I would
No.
pass to you.
So- All right.
Pass the baton.
Well, actually, oddly, it was something that Sky was kind enough to come speak to my class at USC and was phenomenal. And it was actually something he said a few months ago that made me, he was talking about China, which hopefully he'll talk about again today. And it reminded me of the last major shift that we had, which was probably around the birth of television. I think we're analogous somewhere to the 40s now, where there's all this amazing stuff going online, but it's going to be at somebody's expense. So a couple concrete stats. In the days of the big four networks, there were probably 80 scripted shows produced in a given season. Now there are over 400 in a given season, meaning that you could watch an entire season of a show that's on prime time now, every day, all year, and still not see them all. That's just an astounding growth of the sector. So on the good side, there's a lot of content. On the bad side, there's a lot of content, because if you're a network or a content producer, there are more and more options. And so what usually happens in those situations is innovation in terms of business models, in terms of audience aggregation, in terms of reducing friction, in terms of developing new advertising strategies, if that's what you do, becomes even more valuable, right? When things are static, you produce a good show. When things are fluid, producing a good show may not be enough. That's what I would say.
Sky?
What did I say that reminded you?
The fact, well, just the major shift, just the extent of the shift. You were talking about. All right, I'll give it. You were talking about the Netflix 150% sort of thing.
The game changer really is Netflix, and I think, and whoever competes with them. A year ago, I wrote a Forbes blog the title was "Netflix Will Rip the Heart Out of Presale Financing," and it became the most popular business blog that week. And then 1 week later, they swooped in and bought up all the rights to a film that I was working on called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2. And did it for a day and date release, and worldwide IMAX, but Netflix has absolutely changed the game, and they are willing to pay up. What's fascinating to me, I just spoke with Ted Sarandos about this a couple weeks ago. They are willing to pay $20 million per hour, $20 million per hour, and they don't blink at it, because of their world, and they do not view themselves as creating TV shows for the U.S. It's for a worldwide audience. So if you look at Narco, for example, they don't mind if it's shot in a foreign language. They view it that it'll go worldwide. So that is and then you add on top of that it's going day and date, that they're doing movies that's going to go day and date with theatrical, that is ripping the heart out of presale financing. I've had clients that used to buy, for example, territory rights in Germany or wherever, and they're now being offered films where the SVOD rights have been bought out by Netflix, and it completely changes the economics. You just can't do a presale anymore in those territories. So your presale now is to Netflix, right? That's where your presale is, and they're willing to pay more than the budget, which is on an average a happy day, because most films lose money. But here's Netflix willing to offer more than you actually spend on the film, which is so it is absolutely a game changer across the entire board. It has changed the way the competitors view it. It's changed the theatrical experience. The theaters have to catch up with it by offering 4D seats and 3D sound. They have to up the game. You've got Amazon trying to catch up and now just doing SVOD in the U.S. And prices are up, but as you said, there's no back end, and that's the trade-off. So, but frankly, in a world where most films lose money, I would rather take the profit on the upfront amount and waive the back end, because the truth is there's never a back end, right? The back end is usually a big egg, so I'll take it.
But that means no libraries.
That means no. Well, there's a library. Just Netflix owns it. You don't own it.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sky, where I think that both in film and television, where you have a buyer who's willing to pay you more than the cost of your production, by definition, that's a back end. That's a built-in profit. So long as you make it for the right price, you're going to have a profit on whatever piece of content you're creating, which is very rare. And by the way, you get that profit not by waiting 10, 20 years to collect on it or taking risk upon shifting behavior of the consumer. You get it from one party that happens to be pretty credit-worthy, right? So I think that's a big game changer. But I'd say the one element to hit Seth's point, which is the change in the television market, has really been the incoming flow of production from the independent market. So historically, the networks were the suppliers, or the studios, I should say, were the suppliers of that content. Once you had this concept of direct-to-series orders, where you didn't have a massive, pilot to produce and didn't know if it was going to get picked up by either a broadcast channel or a cable network, there's a ton of risk in that. Once that risk was removed and it looked more like a pre-sale model where someone was willing to take the entire, call it 10, 13 plus episodes, that now allowed the independent producer to create content, which is now feeding Netflix, Amazon, and many cable networks.
So, Jason, where's the smart money going? I mean, you're the source. Where are you looking for investments, or where is the upside?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult sector to invest in totality, right? It's from a strategic standpoint, you can see many acquisitions taking place that make a ton of sense if you're Comcast buying DreamWorks Animation, right? For a pure play financial investor like ourselves, we see very few opportunities in investing in development or production. We actually, the returns are so volatile, it's hard to really convince ourselves that that's the place to invest capital. We have decided to place capital in content that has been released and monetizing the long tail of that content. And so when you think about libraries, whether it's in film, TV, or music, we could pick apart those different segments. We think there's opportunities within those specific markets.
Even though we just discussed the fact that there really is no long tail anymore. Well, let me switch that. You obviously see a long tail. Where is that long tail, and where does it fit within the current ecosystem?
That's right. I think that each piece of content is unique. We're talking about situations here where you do sell your full rights package to one buyer, and that party owns the library. There's plenty of libraries that are out there today that existed prior to this financing technology. And when we think about how we think technology is going to change and allow consumers to continue to watch more and more content. Content viewership, if you look at stats, we watch more content now than we actually sleep. So all types of video programming, right? When we think of the driverless car, what are we all going to be doing? Mm-hmm. We're going to be looking at our devices. We're going to be looking at technology within the car and watching programming. So we think that to the extent you have the right type of content, which is hard to sometimes get your hands on, if you have the right type of content, the value of that is going to continue to rise, or it will have a much longer life, I should say, through more and more technology shifts.
Is there any point in getting points in movies or TV series anymore? I mean, not that, and I mean, I'm not talking about net points. I'm talking about gross points. I mean, which used to be a big deal in Hollywood. You don't hear much about that anymore. Is there?
There is. Short answer is yes, if it's not going to Netflix. As long as it's not, Netflix does flat buyouts, so it doesn't, then it becomes irrelevant. But, outside of that, my world revolves around giving points to people, both net and gross, because that's how we get films financed. Try to get costs down, so that's absolutely pivotal.
On the TV side, can anybody speak to that?
No,
Because that was, the back end was always, syndication was where you really made your money. Yes, there's residuals, but it was those international syndication, mini cycles on local TV stations, going to cable networks, and being played over and over again.
This is on a related point. Mind if I talk about the situation of the networks relative
Sure.
to where? So you and I have been doing this panel for 10 years, probably. Even 3 years ago, we talked hypothetically about the pressure that networks would be under relative to over the top, Netflix, et cetera. You want a really quick way to understand why networks in the bundle are a little bit screwed? And once you hear this, it'll be really apparent and helpful, hopefully. So if you're in a cable bundle, half of your revenue, just to say arbitrarily, half of it's advertising and half of it's subscription revenue, right? So if you pay Comcast $100, you're paying $5 to ESPN and 2 cents to this one and 50 cents to that one, right? So that's your total bundle of revenue from all of the subscribers, from all the subscriber fees from the MVPD, and then you're monetizing that through advertising, right? So the question is always, well, as people cut the cord more, why don't these networks leave the bundle or go over the top or do other things? Here's the issue. As soon as you have downward pressure on subscriber revenue, if you're a network, there's nowhere to run, because once your subscribers fall down, you can't retreat to advertising because your CPM revenue is going to fall as well. So there's really no place to run, and once you're in that bundle, as soon as you leave it, you're going to begin cannibalizing your relationship with that existing MVPD. So all of the new channels as a source for content in one way have an advantage because it can be found money. Any perceived downward pressure on the old model is sort of an advantage for those new models, and that's, I think, one of the things that we've been seeing, which is why it's one of the reasons it's easier to rationalize going to an over-the-top service or an SVOD service now relative to how it used to be, because any indication that the bundle weakens has almost an exponential weakening effect on the networks in the bundle.
Sky, in his opening comments, mentioned something about the future of the theater, which was, I think you said, 3D sound and 4D seats. when I was at CS and then NATPE, seemed that most of the discussion was about virtual reality and virtual reality content, as well as 4K HDR, which is the next generation of both TV sets and the way things are produced. I have this vision of sort of the future actually looking like some of the movies we've seen, where everybody is sitting around in an easy chair with a headset on, and they pretty much live their lives, through this new way of seeing. You don't really need, you can feel like you're always there anywhere, and your avatar shows up. Is that where we're headed, and how does VR change the business?
Let me tell you the future of theaters, because I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. Step one, they're going to compete against the surround sound, home, video, day and date by going to as high-end experience as they can. So you see whether it's in theater serving meals, drinks, whatever, you're going to see lounge chairs, and then you're going to see 4D seats that move and shake when the plane is flying and the wind is coming at you and fog and smell. So they're going to do that, and there's 3D sound that's coming, which is remarkable because it sounds like the train is going around you, or it's just an incredible experience to hear 3D sound, because I've done both of these, and it's remarkable. So they're gonna compete, or they're gonna give up, and they're gonna become like bowling alleys down in Pico, and they're just gonna, it's gonna be one of those two. So there's gonna be a bifurcation at the theater level. And the next step beyond that is absolutely going to be virtual reality, and what will happen is that you will go, it'll be a location-based entertainment experience that you walk through, and it'll be a shorter experience, but you'll pay more money, and they'll get as many people through, and they'll convert the theaters into virtual reality entertainment centers. And you can see this online if you want. There's a company called thevoid.com that's already doing this, and I went and did it. It's up in Utah. It's awesome. And it's just it'll blow the theatrical experience away, because instead of sitting there watching the movie, you're going to be part of it. Right? You're going to be a character in it, and so is your friend, by the way, who's with you, because they look like an alien or something. And instead of the normal boring dinner and a movie date, you're going to absolutely prefer to do virtual reality. I guarantee it. And it blows away the Oculus Rift, where you're just sitting at home and watching a screen. It completely transforms the experience. So in the longer run, that's where the theaters are going to go.
And in the short term, it's all about trying to get to that direct consumer relationship. And you're seeing, Fandango and other companies like this trying to create this, where
the only one
where all of a sudden you like seat J13. Well, next time you log in, they're going to say, do you want seat J13? Oh, by the way, you ordered popcorn with a Coke last time. Should we have that ready for when you come this time? Yes. By the way, when you watch that trailer, do you want to see it? The first thing I think about when I'm sitting next to my wife, I say, do you want to see it or not? She nods yes or no, and we make a decision right there. Well, we should be able to purchase a ticket for when it comes out. That's all coming.
And you're nailed it. It's amazing the theaters have completely abdicated this issue, and they have not collected data. And Fandango is the first one that has really done it. There's some other big internet companies that are coming that are planning to do that. But the ability to pitch the next film, because you went and watched film A, and oh, by the way, film B is just like that, so go see that. And they market so that the marketing dollars have power instead of just spraying it around. That's the key.
So Seth, where does VR fit into the TV future?
Well, just to go back, just to reinforce what Sky was saying, I was at one of the major studios 2 days ago, and they're already, to your exact point, they're already preparing to do it. So if you think, how many of you have had a good VR or immersive experience? Okay, how many of you have had rotten ones but not a good one yet? So the next wave of this thing, to Sky's point, things like The Void, it's not just that you're going into this arbitrary world. You actually, there's a great one that you can go see online from The Walk, which was Philippe, I always forget his last name, the guy who walked across between the two World Trade Centers, between the two towers. And he did it on a wire. So Sony actually has a VR demo where you walk between the World Trade Centers. Here's the thing. 30% of the people who try to do it can't. So think about that for a minute. You know it's fake, you know you're in a room, you know your friend's right here, and they still can't do it. Think about because when you look down, you want to vomit. So your body thinks you're in there. So now, once you start coupling that with real IP, Mission Impossible, Star Wars, name it, Disney movies, and you're moving through a physical environment with your friend, that's a real cosmic leap. And to the other thing, real quick, that Sky said about that is the interesting thing about that is how it starts to connect really interestingly to the app economy. So what happens with these things, and it's already starting at the festivals that have VR experiences, Sundance and Tribeca, etc. One of the big throttles on VR has been people have to wait 4 hours to see a 20-minute experience. So now you're going to go into this theater, you're going to have a meal, you're going to have a drink, it's going to tell you when to come back and do this ride. And oh, by the way, if that ride is no good, maybe they give you a discount ticket to some other experience over here. So they can do all sorts of things. It's like the Uberification of the entertainment experience at these new theaters, I think.
How much more expensive is this, though?
$35. You'll pay, and by the way, it's worth it.
But what about production costs?
Oh, production costs right now are very high, and the studios are already gearing up to provide content for it in a very big way. I was at the Fox lab, and they've already got The Martian in all different versions for it. And I will tell you, it's amazing to be on Mars. So the cost of content will come down as more and more people getting into it. And by the way, that's a great place to make money if you're trying to make content. Right now, it's a gold rush to make content for the VR world because there's not a lot of people doing it, and you can make some money doing it.
But what's the increase in production costs?
A lot. It's much higher to cost to produce.
What happens to right now? There is, in terms of technology, there really isn't that much difference between a studio movie and an independent film. I mean, the studios can afford more CGI and more lavish things, but they're both essentially 2D, maybe 3D experiences. How is this VR going to change the independent movie business? And will there be a need for all of those other theaters out there to cater to the 2D world while the high end goes VR?
I'll just swing at that.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is that I think you've heard it. VR is good in short form, right? So I don't think my personal view is that you're not going to see two plus hour movies with a headset on. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to do that, right? So I think it is more of, when you think about the independent market, I think it's more difficult given where the size of those budgets are. Also the theme of those types of movies, right? They're typically not your big franchise, superhero action-driven, films. So I think for the independent market, it might have a different applicability, but maybe it's more of a marketing tool to market your picture, but not have it be a core thesis of the event.
So I'll give you a quick example. Tribeca was a few weeks ago, and I went to their closed VR experience before it opened, which was good because, as I said, the lines were 4 hours in some cases. And has anybody heard of a project called Alumet, by any chance? So, have you seen it? Okay, so there's a guy named, I think it's Eugene Chung, and he has a company called Penrose Digital, I think, in San Francisco, and he built a 20-minute VR experience, and really quickly, it's sort of a combination of like Dr. Seuss and Madeline, if you remember those Madeline books, and Cirque du Soleil or something, because once you go into it, there's this floating world up in the clouds, and you're watching a little girl move through the world, and you're following her. And you're following her as she meets her mother, and you follow her as she goes in a boat. That guy, nobody ever heard of him probably, but that movie is so stunning that he's going to get a deal. Why? Because it's really hard to do that, and most VR experiences suck. This guy actually created something interesting. The other thing to echo where these guys were going, I think, is that's a 20-minute experience. When you have it, you feel like you've gone somewhere completely different for 4 hours. Yeah. It's a discontinuity to what we're used to in entertainment experiences, which are sort of continuously divided attention where you're watching a movie, but you're on your phone and you're going to the bathroom. When you're in those worlds, you're in those worlds, so you really feel like you went somewhere else. So I think 20 minutes, a half an hour is, I think you're right. They're not going to be as long, but it's fine.
We're going to go to the audience for questions in just a second, but I have two financing questions I want to do a quick pass on the panel on. The first is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's been out there now for a few years. Is it the future? Is it part of the future? Is it part of the past? Give us a state of the industry.
I'll give you 2 cents on, there's 2 kinds of crowdfunding. There's donation crowdfunding, which is Kickstarter, and there's equity crowdfunding, which is like, there's a couple of sites. I think the one's called indiecrowdfunder.com. And I think the donation model it works for high-end people who, for some bizarre reason, want to do that, but it doesn't work for normal. It just doesn't work for a normal producer. The equity crowdfunding, what I don't understand what people haven't done. You're now allowed to advertise. Hello, people, you can advertise your offering, and no one's done it, and I don't get why. But equity crowdfunding would work if somebody advertised their offering and you could put a thing in the trades or do something, and now you can. And you can do both. There's a thing called Reg A and there's Reg D, and there's various ways you can go, but absolutely viable way to raise money, a lot to make films, but for some bizarre reason hasn't really been done yet in a big way.
And haven't also the regulations changed so you don't really have to be a qualified investor anymore?
That's
That was huge. By the way, being a qualified investor, I think you had to have a provable net worth of something in excess of $250,000, which these days that's the equity.
No. We're accredited. It was accredited investor, and you had to have more than $200,000 if annual income. If you're married, it had to be $300,000 or net worth in excess of $1 million. That was the requirement. However, Reg A has now reduced that. It now lets you go up to $50 million without that, without accredited investors. But it's kind of a semi-prospectus. It's a pretty complicated, costly process. You're better off sticking with accredited investors and just going and then doing full-blown advertising and skipping the prospectus way of Reg A. So it's the old what's called 506 Reg D offering is where and that's the easier way to go, cheaper and easier.
Anybody else want to comment on the funding issue? Okay, I saw a hand go up. We'll go here and then we'll go here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of want to add my 2 cents because I'm in virtual reality and augmented reality.
Why don't you stand up and so we can really hear you?
Yeah, so I thought I'd draw my 2 cents on this because I run a VR and AR software company.
What's it called?
So
Just
it's
like
called Sprawly. So we created the first search engine in VR. And what you guys got to think of that as being VR is the next computing platform. It's going to change not only how we consume content, but different methods, right? So VR can mean so much to different people. So you have 3D images. So the content you mentioned up there, the Climb or the one Penrose Studios did, that was 3D images. The other piece of content is 360 video. So you can put on a headset and immerse yourself in a documentary, and you can be in Syria and look around, and you can't do that in a 2D screen. So when you think about how immersive this is, this computing platform is going to disrupt the entire industry. And it's not it, it's when. Right. So it's not just VR. These have applications on augmented reality as well. Right now, the hardware is clunky. Okay, so you're consuming the hardware, you're consuming content on supercomputers, which is generally gaming consoles, and that renders 3D images. And then the other device is the mobile phone. So it's only a matter of time until these devices will get even stronger. So when you ask a question about movie theaters, will people still be going? Yeah, I think people will, but they're in trouble. Like, look what's going to happen in the next 2 to 4 years. I mean, we have analytics on people who use our application. We have 8 to 10-year-olds who spend almost an hour in a headset. They're not going to want to go to a theater. They're going to sit at home. They're going to consume content, either live 360 content or 3D rendered content.
do you think we're going to see 360 VR sports?
Yeah, I mean.
Live broadcast. In other words, you're no longer watching the game. You're on the field in the game. You're seeing it from the quarterback's perspective or the guy on the other side of the.
So, yes, and right now, these cameras, these equipments, these cameras, these rigs you can get, they used to be thousands of dollars last year. Now I can get a Ricoh Theta at Best Buy for $400, and I can film it on my own, upload it on YouTube 360, upload it on a platform like ours, and people can start consuming it. Where this is really disruptive is the advertisement space. I mean, you can immerse yourself in a game for 20 seconds rather than seeing a pre-roll, and you can't escape the ad. You're in a headset. So imagine what the CPMs would be on that. I mean, this is an industry that will also help the traditional content publishers who are struggling. The New York Times,
Disruptive in a good way.
in a good way, right? So
Okay.
a lot of potential. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
We have a question down here, I promise.
This is getting back to a point you brought up earlier, which kind of raised my query, but this whole idea of day-to-day release, which is kind of big news depending on which side of the fence you're on, clearly. That's going to fundamentally change the relationship between studios and the exhibitors, right? I mean, it's inevitable, correct?
Yes.
Do you foresee a time when we revisit the notion of abolishing the Paramount Decree of 1948, where studios could own theaters? I mean, Disney kind of did it with the El Capitan and Crest, where they can contain and control the experience all the way through in order to be relevant?
Yeah, the vertical integration is no longer an antitrust violation, and so I think that decree is no longer valid. I personally think that's I don't think anyone's paying attention to it, and I think it's no longer valid. So exactly, I agree.
And an early example of that, if you remember 20 years ago, Disney Quest, anybody remember Disney Quest? I was working there at the time, and so Disney built, essentially ahead of their time, these sort of experiences. There was one in Chicago, there was one in the Valley, where you would go in and do an Aladdin experience or whatever. They were built by Imagineering, and of course, they will definitely do more of those.
Okay. There was a hand all the way in the back. We'll work our way back forward. Okay, go ahead, you.
Hi, this is directed more of Sky, right? Use your abbreviation. I'm Marlon Schulman. I'm CEO of Para Equity Fund. We're doing precisely, we're building a community platform exactly based on 506 and Reg A Plus for the exact publication, funding, and acceleration to market of Para-centric features, VR, AR, motion pictures. So while you are amazed that you haven't seen it, hopefully you will soon. And I'm speaking at the 215 crowdfunding conference.
Go. I'm glad to hear it, because I mean, it's this huge opportunity to do it, both Reg A and the 506, right?
I'll just speak to you, my partner's up in the front.
Okay,
Okay.
anytime.
Go ahead, and well, we got one other person in the back. Go ahead.
Brady Romberg, I'm a producer. I'm just trying to figure out where the best opportunities are because we make content and raise money. Serial, theatrical, I know you guys said we are, but just where's the silver line?
Can I
Sure.
take a swing at that? If you guys want to make money, if you want to get money to make a film, ready? It's really easy right now. All you need to do is do English language Chinese co-productions. That's all you got to do. I've got clients with, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on Hollywood, and they're saying, Sky, just get us Chinese thing, because it gets through the quota in China. It gets 42% of the box office instead of 25. It'll make it English language, so it plays around the world. All you got to do is find a theme that plays in China. It doesn't even have to be shot there. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2 was shot in New Zealand. And you can, you need some Chinese actors, and you need some theme that somehow plays. I mean, you could, we were allies in World War II. You could do a number of projects that involved World War II where we were allies, and it would play in both countries and around the world. So this is a missed opportunity for a lot of people. But I mean, there will be a billion, $3 billion this year coming into Hollywood from China. Where is everybody?
How do you find those?
They'll find you. If you have a project, then you talk to me, and then you know, from there, it's easy. And it just amazes me how many people just like, oh, I can't do it. It's like, what's so hard about this?
All the way in the back, you're,
Quick question for Seth. Did you make it all the way across the wire?
Yeah, is that Brian? How you doing? I did, but it's interesting. He asked if I made it all the way across the wire. Here's what's interesting. I had to remind myself continuously that it wasn't real in order to get across that. So when you think about the non-entertainment applications of this, right there for therapy, right? So agoraphobia, all sorts of modalities. They're actually using VR already for stroke recovery.
Training,
Training.
medical training,
Yes.
the military. It's the future.
Travel.
It's everything. Well, you don't have to go to Egypt anymore, right? You just.
I'll give you the most boring one from those of you who aren't convinced. This is an AR one, not a VR one, but I saw a fund that had invested in. So the worst possible part of running a business like Amazon, right, is warehouse picking. It's where you go to, it's just despair. It's the end of the world. So what they did was they took an AR system with goggles, and there's actually a superimposition of this data layer, right, on top of the warehouse, and it becomes a freaking video game. So now you're trying to beat your personal best as you're going down 5 rows to the right and up 1 here. So now they've got an incentive, they're trackable, they can be incentivized, and the worst part of running a pack and pick business actually can kind of almost become fun, which is scary. And think about how much money does that thing have to make for Amazon to, realize a great profit on it.
when you were doing the wire, do you actually walk? And if so, I mean, were you on a treadmill or
This is
or
a
a
great,
big room? Or?
This is a great question, and it goes to what Sky is talking about with these sort of immersive environments. The problem with Oculus, and it's a little better with Vive, is that you can actually fall over and crack your head. You can walk into the wall, all of this stuff. So the mediated experiences where it's actually created for you, you can do a lot more. What they did with the wire, it's a great question, is they actually cut a hose in half, even though it's non-functional, and they track, so you're actually walking across this thing that feels like a wire, and they put a fan behind you. And the fan, they don't always do that, but when they put the fan behind you, you really freak out. It really takes it to a whole other level.
Okay, let's go ahead and, you've had your hand up early. Go ahead, stand up.
Hi, I'm Scott from a company called Humans. I spoke about 360 video and CGI. There's, I guess, another little one you should look out for, called volumetric video. And since you kind of touched on it, a lot of the time when people talk about virtual reality, it's a passenger experience, especially with 360 video. But I feel, having been in AR VR since 2009, the real value is in the walk around. That's why augmented reality excites me a lot. But I'm just wondering, from a funding perspective, and HTC Vive offers that little bit of a walk around real scale experience. From a funding perspective, how much are you seeing any at all favorability to the seated passenger experience, to the walk around experience? I know you touched on the Void, I know, but what would you value more at this stage, or is it all open again?
I say open game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's open game.
By the way, we're gonna do a, just for those of you who are interested, I think 6:15 tomorrow night we have a conversation about cinematic VR. I don't know what room it's in, but it's 6:15 and you'll see my name on it tomorrow.
Go ahead.
Hi. Is there any way to reliably value a new technology that hasn't been done before in its pre-acquisition of customer stage?
No.
It can be done, it's just, the reliability is the question. You can model it, I've done it, if you implement your business plan, this is the value you'll create. But the assumption is that you will actually execute the business plan and get the whatever market share you think you're going to get. You can do it, it's just it's a purely theoretical exercise. And then it's up to the investor whether or not they actually, what percentage of belief they have in you. Is it, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000? I mean, the math can be done. It's the question of, do they believe that you're actually going to implement your business plan?
And are there comparable technologies or products that you can compare yourself to that make your business plan more more validated.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, he's actually really good at this, Larry is, and the reason is because you're always applying reasonable comps. So if it's a new business, you still have to look at box office or television revenue or app revenue or something defensible, and you know, it's as good as the assumptions, but if you start with a reasonable hypothesis, it's going to be better than if you just, you know, get drunk and make it up.
It's impossible to, well, that works sometimes. But yeah, it's impossible to predict unicorns, okay? That's, everybody hopes on it. You can't invest in it on a, you know, a pre-launch basis. Go ahead.
My name's Jenny Jones. I'm a filmmaker. As a consumer, there's no line between film, TV, YouTube, whatever, you know, it all is the same thing at this point, or it's getting to that point. So my question is, as a filmmaker, and when you're on the side of the content creation, knowing that the international sales model is becoming obsolete and that pre-sales, you know, are dependent on a theatrical release, at what point do you need to declare what it is your project is trying to do? Because, for example, if you have your movie financed through pre-sales or partial pre-sales and you create something that Netflix or Amazon wants to buy the rights to, assuming you make something good and they're not passing on it, at what point do you have to pick a side?
I mean, I'm going to say that I don't believe the pre-sale model is dead. So I'm going to start by saying that. I think that's going to continue to live. There are many foreign buyers out there. Sky, you probably work with them day in, day out, that want great product.
But don't most of the pre-sales are reliant on some form of U.S. theatrical release?
They are. I mean, sometimes they are, and so then you have to think about who is that domestic release partner. The great news is that there's probably new domestic distributors that have been formed in the past 2 to 3 years that are new buyers for your content that had no existence 5-10 years ago. Of course, there's been consolidation amongst that group, but you have companies like an STX, like a Broad Green, and others that kind of fit that mold.
My question is, though, is what is the benefit of even having a theatrical release when you are going to be making your money back right away from Netflix or Amazon and probably won't make anything?
Well, that's more of a financial decision, right? Do you want to ride your upside or take built-in profit? If you said, I believe I have the next grade A film that's going to outperform, the likelihood of you obtaining more financial success, profitability, through holding back rights, not giving them fully to one party, that's your decision to make. But if you said, hey, I'm going to get 150%, to use Sky's example earlier, you might say, that's just too much of a profit to give up.
If you sell directly to Netflix, you're basically making a direct-to-video deal. And you know, you're never going to get the kind of premium you get if you do a theatrical release and then sell to Netflix. Well, it's not just theatrical, that you have a chance to possibly sell to one of the pay services and then go on to Netflix. You know, the issue with Netflix is they're looking for content that they can get before the 9-year pay TV window expires. So that's really what they're the premium that they're paying. But you're never going to get the big upside if you don't release theatrically. TV is a little bit different. I mean, they just want to buy all rights. The other area, of course, is reality TV, which that's something, although Amazon is getting into it a little bit, is still wide open, and that's why you see so much reality out there. There are a lot more opportunities in terms of being able to monetize it if you get a hit. We've got time for a few more questions. There were hands that have gone up. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Vicki Lynn. This is for Sky. How do you get these 4D theaters financed? A lot of movie theater owners are very old-fashioned. They don't want to spend the money.
They're going to be forced to, because they're going to it's do that or go bankrupt. So the answer for it is that it's the same issue of who financed 3D and who financed Dolby and who financed every other in digital, when they went to digital. And it's kind of a combination of theater and studio and bank loans and the normal craziness to put together financing. That'll be the answer. There's no.
And don't forget, there's been a tremendous amount of consolidation in the U.S. on screens. So the stronger are getting stronger.
Yeah, the big chains can afford it. They're gonna have to. And they'll up the prices, right? They'll do 40s, 3D, and they'll just up the prices, and people will pay it.
Is there going to be an exclusive theatrical window in the future, or are we going to go basically day and date? And the advantage to the theatrical experience is that it's going to be 4D.
Yes.
But you'll still be able to watch it at home in your,
Yes.
on your 4K HDR TV set.
It will absolutely be day and date. It'll absolutely be day and date, and your choice will be at a higher premium at home versus going out for what you'll hope to be a better experience. I mean, it's absolutely.
And the only thing I say, that's probably going to take a while. That's not happening overnight.
No. Yeah, but we're getting there.
Any other questions?
Definitely getting there.
Boy. I actually had, I wanted to come back on the panel. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but we really haven't talked about the possibility, how sports is going to be impacted by all of these new technologies. Because that's the one thing that really, so far, has to be watched live. It's where the advertisers pay a premium, the content goes for a premium. When are we going to see the next step in 3D or VR technology coming to the sports team near you?
I'll give you the first part of the answer, which is why it hasn't happened yet, and then these guys could chime in. But the reason that sports has been so incredibly durable is because ESPN and Fox, principally, and the networks to a lesser degree, the other networks, have had a huge economic stake in making that experience as visceral as possible. So whether it was the glowing hockey puck or the various innovations, there's so much money in sports, and there's so much ability to get. There's a whole culture around television sports that's been so far ahead from a production standpoint of everything else in television, that the reason that I think it's been so powerful is they do such a damn good job that it's really hard to beat it. So you have seen NextVR and some other people do these immersive sports experiences, and they're okay. But the standard that's set by the existing networks is just really high.
I'll add something from a consulting job I had a couple of years ago. They're beginning to incorporate RFID technology as well as motion sensor and accelerometers into sports equipment, especially shoulder pads and helmets and things like that. So if you combine VR with all of the data that can be collected from an athlete, especially football, you can actually create, you'll have the data that if you had the right technology, you could actually feel what it's like to get hit or to run down a field. I mean, we're actually going to the next step. That data, that technology actually exists in terms of being able to collect it.
So you'll get a concussion? Will you be suing the maker of the equipment?
Well, that's interesting because you were talking about the Martian VR. You actually, if you do the full Martian VR experience with the haptics of the chair, you have that. What happens is you actually become Matt Damon's character, and you're using the controllers to guide the lunar rover, and the chair, if you do the full experience, is actually, and you feel, right?
Yes.
You feel,
yes.
by God, like you're in, you forget for a second that you're not on Mars. I think with sports, the issue is, chairs, how do you get the chairs into people's houses? They're expensive, but also it's dynamic data, it's not a rendered experience.
Okay. Go ahead, in the back.
For anyone on the panel, a lot of sound stages this year. What would you do differently from traditional sound stages to be successful in the new era?
I'd make sure that it works for VR production. That's what I would do.
Do it in a tax incentive location that you're going to have bodies there.
Yeah. Georgia.
Do we have any other questions?
You want an interesting case
Oh,
study
sure.
on that, just real quick? So Breaking Bad was actually written to be shot in Ontario, in California. That's where the pilot was. And the reason that this isn't a soundstage question, but they moved it because of the tax incentive. That's why that thing wound up in New Mexico. So that's always a good thing to think about.
How important are tax incentives at least in terms of, this always seems to be a recurring question because it changes all the time.
Absolutely crucial. It's, you know, when you go to a state like that gives you 30% of the budget, it absolutely is make or break. So every production decision is based on what subsidies are available and whether or not they can be monetized. And there's not a single production that is made without focus on that issue.
What's the hot state now?
Georgia, right now. Louisiana got hammered by their cap. They put in a cap and it just absolutely dried up overnight. And now everyone's in Georgia.
Okay. Did you have a comment or? No, I'm sorry. If there are no more questions, I'm out of questions. I think we've really covered the waterfront here. I want to thank our panelists. And thank you, and we'll see you at Digital Hollywood Fall. Thank you, guys.
Oh, yeah.